Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Sorry to interrupt. I know everybody's been patient as we've been coming out, but at this time, I would like to call the Wilmington Board of Selectmen meeting of Monday, August 22nd, 2022 to order. At this time, I would kindly ask that you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to take a moment to recognize a gentleman who passed away who is a Wilmington resident. Sergeant Kenneth J. Carroll Jr. of the Massachusetts State Police lost his courageous battle with cancer this week on August 20th. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Ken, his family, his wife, his children. His family has done work for the town, and he was active with the Massachusetts State Police at the time of his passing. He was 53 years old, and he was a 1986 graduate of Wilmington High School. I would kindly ask that you all please bow your heads for a moment of silence for Ken. Thank you. For roll call this evening, we have 4 of the 5 Board of Selectmen members here. Gary DePalmer is on vacation. He is trying to tap into us virtually. He may or may not be successful based on the technology limitations at his geographical location. He did want me to let everyone know here and at home that his intention is to join us, but obviously he's doing that on his vacation time and is not staying at home and is having some IT technical issues. So he may be joining us intermittently this evening. At this time, I would like to move right into the transmitting of the Treasury warrants. 202306, 202306 WIRES, 6A, 202307, 202307 WIRES, and 7A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. We do have one set of minutes to approve, which are the minutes for July 18 of 2022. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept those minutes as presented?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to our 7 o'clock appointment. It is with Valerie Gingrich, our Planning and Conservation Director, regarding the review of the comment letter on the proposed affordable housing proposal for 79 Nichols Street. Good evening, Valerie. Thank you very much for being here. So prior to turning the mic over to Valerie, I wanted to just state to people that are here today and listening at home that we were not due to have a second Board of Selectmen meeting this month. I asked as the chair that we add this meeting based on the site visit for Mass Housing with Mr. Michael Busby and the fact that we needed to turn around a comment letter in short order, and the fact that if we waited till our next meeting, which was September 12th, we would in essence miss the opportunity to provide this public meeting so that residents could come in and hear about the proposal, that you would be given an opportunity to submit written comments, that you would be given an opportunity to come in here personally and speak on your own behalf. So we added another meeting to the schedule, so that's why we're here tonight. So this is very specifically for this proposal. So as we mentioned previously, the Wilmington Board of Selectmen does not have the permitting authority for this project. We do not have the ability to approve or to deny this project. We are being asked to provide a comment letter, and it's through the expertise of Valerie and her other professional colleagues and getting the information from you as residents and people that may have submitted that are sitting at home and from this board, that we will collectively submit something on behalf of the town that will be comprised of the town comments, but also of the resident letters and also what we glean from you for feedback tonight. As part of this process, I had the manager invite the applicant and the attorney and their consultants to come this evening. They declined that invitation, and they sent a letter in lieu of their attendance, which I will read into the record now that we received this afternoon. So if you can indulge me the opportunity to read that. It's dated today's date, and it's dated August 22nd, 2022. It is sent to Judith L. O'Connell, the Chair of the Board of Selectmen, regarding the proposed 40B Baldwin Landing Wilmington project, and it's MHID number 1150. Dear Chairman O'Connell, as you are aware, the applicant's development team will not be in attendance at tonight's Board of Selectmen meeting. As you are also aware, in response to comments raised by Mass Housing, public officials and residents of the area relative to the original proposal, my client has submitted revised plans to Mass Housing for review. We understand that the town will offer additional comments to Mass Housing following tonight's meeting, and we look forward to reviewing the same. As the board will note, the revised plan is comprised of 10 single-family dwellings and 1 duplex, and all 12 of these units will be marketed for sale. There will be no rental units. In terms of density, the average lot size will be 7,855 square feet per building, and the development consists of 10,882 square feet of upland land area per dwelling unit. In comparison, the comprehensive permit development that abuts the subject property, in parentheses, and which development garnered the unanimous support of various town officials and town boards, is comprised of 14 single-family dwellings and 1 duplex, and it has an average lot size of 7,512 square feet. Moreover, this adjacent development is comprised of 10,349 square feet of upland area per dwelling unit. It is also worth noting that my client's proposed development will consist of 36 bedrooms on 4.36 acres of land, which equals 5,275 square feet of land per bedroom. By way of comparison, a typically new constructed 4-bedroom house located on a 20,000 square foot conforming lot has only 5,000 square feet of land per bedroom. In contrast, the other comprehensive permit project currently proposed in Wilmington appears to include 225 bedrooms on 4.62 acres, which equals approximately 890 square feet per bedroom. With regard to traffic concerns previously raised, and as was noted at the August 9th site visit, this modest number of units will not significantly impact the traffic counts on Nickel Street, though we certainly appreciate the challenges associated with monitoring and enforcing existing traffic and speed controls. As a development team, we obviously are not able to address distracted, impaired, and/or reckless driving, but my client certainly is amenable to incorporating whatever traffic calming measures make sense in the area, including without limitation considering any proposed reconfiguration of the island at the intersection of Nickel Street and Shawshene Avenue. Again, we look forward to reviewing the town's comment letter to Mass Housing, and we respectfully request that you include a copy of this letter in the record of tonight's meeting. Thank you for your time and consideration. Very truly yours, Michael J. Newhouse, Esquire. And a copy was sent to Jeffrey Hull, the town manager, Valerie Gingrich, the director of planning and conservation, Kristen Coster of LA Associates, Inc., and Stephen B. Sawyer and his client. Okay, so I wanted to read that into the record. At this time, I just want to share that I'm going to be turning the microphone over to Valerie Gingrich to lead us into the proposal and take us through. After that, you will have an opportunity to speak. And just as a point of notation for you, we will be accepting comment letters from the public until this coming Friday. So if anyone wants to submit anything via writing, you do have an opportunity to submit something until Friday of this week through the town manager's office. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to you, Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie Gingrich, I'm the Director of Planning and Conservation for the town. I wanted to go over a little bit of background, how we got to this point, just for some context. So currently, we're under 10% of Wilmington's housing is restricted as affordable. And since we're under that 10%, developers can apply to Mass Housing to get site eligibility and then apply to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit that overrides our local bylaws, our local zoning. So that's, in this case, 79 Nichols, the owner of the site, applied to Mass Housing in May, and that was for a 20-unit proposal and 4 single-family homes in the front and 16 multifamily in a building in the back. And following a site visit with Mass Housing requested that they redesign that project. And on July 19th, the redesigned project was submitted to Mass Housing with 12 units, and that's 10 single families and 1 duplex for a total of 12, 6 in the front and 6 in the back, if you're familiar with the site. And a site visit was held by Mass Housing on August 9th, and then as the chairwoman stated, the comments are due next week on September 2nd. So this proposal is for single-family homes and a duplex in the back. There's a roadway proposed, a 40-foot wide right-of-way with a 24-foot wide paved roadway. Spans the wetlands on the site that run kind of through the middle of the site. And if you've looked at the plan is very conceptual. It doesn't show a lot of detail on it. At this stage of their approval process with Mass Housing only requires a very conceptual plan. So when I run through the comments that we put together, you'll kind of get the theme that there's a lot more questions than comments at this point. But I wanted to just kind of give a quick overview of what that proposal, the redesigned proposal, looks like. 3-bedroom units, and I'm not sure if there's anything more to say about that. Like I said, it's very conceptual, so it's hard to kind of know what's actually being proposed, which leads into one of the first comments that we included in the draft letter. We noted that the revised project is a better reflection of the housing types in the neighborhood, but it's still unclear how they'll accommodate all of the necessary elements of a development within that dense site, right? So where will the stormwater be? What does the grading look like? Will there be retaining walls that are necessary? How much wetland impact will there be? Kind of, the details of that proposal. So we commented that specifically that some of the structures are only 15 feet apart, which is less than we typically like to see in our most dense areas, which is usually a minimum of 20 feet. And just sort of on that theme of it's very tight and we're kind of wondering how it's all going to fit together. Another comment that we made was that it doesn't appear that the project as designed meets at least 5 of Mass Housing's sustainable development principles. This was brought up in a comment letter, and we agree that Mass Housing asked that developments meet 5 of those sustainable development principles, and we point out that that it's probably not quite fair to say that they're eliminating neighborhood blight when that home was actively used until the applicant purchased it. It could be fixed up and reused. So calling it blight is, that's a little bit a matter of interpretation, I would say. So we just pointed that out for Mass Housing. We also pointed out that it's probably not considered a rural area when it comes to transportation. So some of the items that were checked off for the sustainable development principles, we just kind of call into question for Mass Housing. On traffic and pedestrian safety, we noted that, as you all know, it's a cut-through. It's typically either jammed up with traffic or there are a lot of high speeds going through there. It's kind of one or the other that's happening. And, the argument will be made that adding 12 units isn't going to drastically change what's happening on that street, but we do note that they will be adding a new intersection and new movements to what's happening there, further complicating it, and that the town, once they come to the town, will be looking for a full traffic study. We'll be looking at site distances to make sure that that you can see far enough to be able to safely pull out and to pull in. And also looking for pedestrian connectivity to the existing sidewalks that are there. Another topic that is brought up in the letter, this site is not in the town's sewer district, but sewer is being proposed there. So, and I won't get into kind of the ins and outs of that at this point. We can if folks have questions, but essentially we have places in town where you can have sewer and places in town where you're not allowed to have sewer. In this case, it's not supposed to have sewer. They're proposing sewer. And the comment that we have is that they haven't demonstrated that they can't do on-site septic systems. And in fact, the comment was made that the soils on the site are very good for on-site septic. So pushing them to show us why they wouldn't be able to do on-site disposal instead of sewer, and sort of leads into the comment that we made about utilities. There's currently no sewer in Nickel Street, so if they showed that they can't do on-site septic, we would want them to show a very detailed plan of how they're planning on connecting to sewer and bringing it to the site. They would have to show that they have adequate water pressure and flow, and they would have to meet all of our stormwater requirements, or we would push them to meet our stormwater requirements, which again goes back to sort of the density that's being proposed. And on that concept plan, they're not showing areas for stormwater. So I think that's a general overview of the main topics that are in that draft letter. There's a little bit more detail in the letter, but I didn't want to, go word for word, and I'm happy to take any questions that the board might have.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the effort that you put forth. I want to give everybody an ample opportunity to speak, and I know that there are a lot of people in the audience. I'll take the lead, though, in just making some comments that these are just my comments and my interpretation, that it's troublesome to me that I know we're talking about 79 Nichols, but this is the second 40B project that is being proposed in the town in a non-sewer district.
Yep.
And both projects would have the potential to do on-site, and through the 40B process, they're seeking sewer in a non-sewer district. Again, we're here to talk about 79 Nichols, but the prior meeting that I was a part of for the other project, when I asked them directly if they had a plan B as to what they would do if they didn't get sewer, the comment was, we don't have a plan B because we feel eminently confident that the state is going to relieve us of that requirement based on the affordability factor and the 40B factor. Now, I'm not asking you to respond to that, but it's just an observation, and I would just share my opinion that I think the 40B process is broken for the state. I think that the process of having a Board of Selectmen give a comment letter when it's the Zoning Board of Appeals that is going to be hearing the case and actually deciding if they're going to grant a permit or not, there's a fundamental disconnect. It's the wrong board giving the comment letter. I'm happy to listen to the proposal, weigh in and give my opinion, but it just seems a very dysfunctional process that literally the state is going to pay no attention to the majority of the issues and decide if they're going to approve it or not. And then the only thing that could be impacted, the other project, for example, is they would do less units, do more private sewer disposal on site, and the only thing that would be impacted is profit margin. That's it. So I think it's a disservice to every community, 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, that are going to be saddled with these projects that are being decided at the state level. I think our state rep needs to be involved. I think our state delegation needs to be involved, our federal delegation, because the process is broken. And for what it's worth, I appreciate the opportunity to vent about it, but this isn't working. And I don't think that this is what 40B was intended to do. I'm not specifically picking on this project, but I think fundamentally it's broken. There are people that would want to hook up to sewer that have been denied, that pay residential taxes all year through, year over year, and are told no. And then large developments come in and they can just hook up and get relief through a state decision, I think is fundamentally wrong. So I appreciate the indulgence in taking that information in. So I'll turn over to my fellow board members. I'll start to my right. Selectman Carr, not to spot you, but I'll start this way and move along the table if you have any questions or comments.
Sure. Just to, in line with your comments about the sewer district, could town manager Hull explain to us about the emergency sewer issues? That doesn't the town have so much
Capacity.
of an emergency sewer that, you know, putting this into a sewer, conforming it, a non-district sewer district into a sewer, same as on West Street, will that take away from emergency issues?
So when the comprehensive stormwater management plan was done, I believe it was in the early 2000s, as Valerie Gingrich noted, it established areas where sewer could take place and where it couldn't, and there was a certain capacity that was established in reserve for instances, for example, if there was a resident who just their system failed and they were not able to reestablish another septic system, and there was sewer in the area, they would be able to tie in. That was at least one example, as I understand it, where access could be made to this reserve, so to speak. In terms of whether the ability of this development to connect to sewer would deplete that reserve, that had been my understanding, quite frankly, through the prior project, and I believe, and I don't know, Valerie, if you can comment on this, but I believe there was an inquiry made from within DEP, and we were told that it would not necessarily deplete that reserve. Are you aware of that?
That's right. We, staff from the town, reached out to Mass DEP, and the folks there said that we are to self-govern our comprehensive wastewater resource management plan, and that that these units, the allocation wouldn't have to come out of our reserve because of the circumstances. So there would still be that reserve if the Board of Appeals sees that it's the appropriate thing to grant the project and grant the sewer access.
And in way of the process, all right, so if Mass Housing, once they get this information from us that you put together, and by the way, thank you for putting this together, and I'm sure the residents will have their letters, and I encourage you all to get them into this town hall so that it can be included. So if Mass Housing, what will they do when they get this? They'll approve it or deny it. So if they approve it, then it goes to the Board of Appeals. And then the Board of Appeals can deny or approve. Is that the process?
That is the process. Yeah, Mass Housing is required to consider the comments that are submitted, and they have to look at a set of criteria that they rule on, which aren't the same things that we're going to be looking at during the ZBA process, but they'll either grant site approval or not, and if they do, then the applicant can apply to the Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit where we would get into all of the details of the development.
And if Mass Housing does not approve or does not grant, then it's over. It dies right there? Or does the applicant have other than appealing it, I suppose, through the courts or whatever, do they have other avenues? In other words, just going right to the Zoning Board of Appeals without?
No, they would need to get the site approval from Mass Housing before going to you can't skip that step.
Okay. And is that a public hearing? I would assume it would be, where people can attend?
The mass housing process, no, it's not. It's an internal review that's done at mass housing.
Okay. I noticed in the letter, just to maybe address it, I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly as well. You mentioned that there was a 5 single-family housing that was proposed on that piece of land, but the density prevented it from going through, and now they're proposing 12. Is that's basically what 5 is a no, but we're going to try for 12?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of, I should explain that a little bit more maybe. They were proposing to do the 5 units. They showed during the planning board process when they submitted an application for a conservation subdivision, they went through that process and they showed that the whole parcel would yield 5 single-family units under our existing zoning. So what they were proposing then is to put those 5 units in the front portion of the parcel and not cross the wetlands to the back and have the back preserved as open space. But when they took those 5 units and put them all in the front, they couldn't get everything to work because there wasn't quite enough room. So they received comments from town departments, fire, engineering, DPW, our department, and they weren't able to address the concerns that we had over public safety and other issues. So ultimately, they withdrew that proposal.
And speaking of public safety, has public safety, meaning fire and police, weighed in on this? Because to get a fire truck in that dense area, 12 potential units, 6 in the front and 6 in the back?
Correct. They did. And one of the comments from fire was the distance between the houses. I think we all had a concern about that. It's a little tight for them to be able to, and then they get concerned about fires moving from one structure to another. But they didn't have a lot of specific comments at this point because those plans are so conceptual. So I think that as they develop their plans and submit to the Board of Appeals, if that happens, I think they would have more comments at that point.
Now, conceptual, they don't have to, the developer doesn't have to get so specific, I guess. So they're going to Mass Housing is going to take this as a, without specifics.
Yeah, they only require a conceptual plan, and I think the reason for that is they're looking at larger picture issues, like is the site appropriate for residential housing generally, right? Is the type of unit proposed generally appropriate for the neighborhood? So they're looking at it a little bit different than we're going to look at it. They're looking at it very generally and very conceptually.
It's probably generally okay to put a house there, but I don't know about 12. And how about, you made mention, just so that the public knows, about the Middlesex Canal.
Yes.
And that issue over there as well.
That's right. I meant to include that. So we did mention in the draft letter that there's no mention in their application, in their materials, or on the plan to the Middlesex Canal, and that it's, a historic district and the importance of that. And we know that they're aware of that because their proposal before the planning board previously included public space along the canal to see it, to walk along it, to provide some education about it. They were working with the Canal Commission on some of those details. So wanted to just point that out for Mass Housing, that the canal is there and it's an important historic piece of the town.
Thank you. Because I know that I think at Princeton, there's an issue with the water area over there, so there should be an issue with the water area here, I would think. Thank you.
Anything further?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Selectman Bender.
Madam Chair, thank you. Valerie, thank you very much. for that summary and for the draft letter. Madam Chair, thank you. I want to compliment you on having this meeting in the order of transparency here. I really appreciate it, even though we'd normally be on summer recess. I think it's important that we have another opportunity to garner input. I appreciate the comments that have been made by both my colleagues already, and I tend to agree that I also am left scratching my head as I learn more and more about the 40B process. I too have concerns. I appreciate those comments. Valerie, my question for you is the kind of piggyback on Mr. Kyra, the timeline. Once the comment letter is submitted to Mass Housing from the town, what's our timeline looking like? Is it days, weeks, months? Any indication on what we could expect?
From what the gentleman at Mass Housing, Michael Busby, had commented on, I believe he was expecting that they would be finished with their process sometime in October. But we don't have a specific, timeline for that.
Yeah, sure. I thank you. I'm not looking for a specific date, but just a kind of general time frame, since we are speaking in generalities here this evening, apparently. In after that, that would be Mass Housing says, yes, we believe that this project can move forward, or no, we don't believe this project is fit. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and they'll include, like they did in the letter that they issued for 100 West Street. They'll include, aspects that the development team should look at closely and address during the ZBA process. So they do take some of our comments and reiterate and ask the applicant to focus on certain things.
And has the ZBA been apprised of this project at all yet?
I don't know if they have been directly contacted about it other than just general knowledge in the community.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I welcome people's input here this evening. Like my colleagues, I too have received quite a bit of feedback in the mail and in email, specifically those with favorable and unfavorable opinions of the project, and I have, like my colleagues, submitted that to be part of the record. So thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing more from you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie, two questions, and then I'm going to bring it over to Selectman Maselli. Is in your experience, has Mass Housing declined any applications that you're aware of, like through your conversations with your colleagues at different forums that you might have been a part of? And to that point, we're in a housing crisis in Massachusetts. They're talking about other zoning initiatives that they're going to try and push to the cities and towns because they want to try and stimulate development so that we can have more housing units in our inventory for Massachusetts. So forgive the statement, but I'm thinking they're going to be more tolerant about projects because they need units in our inventory for the state. Do you think that has any bearing on decision-making, in your opinion?
I don't know, but I do know that, well, my impression is that they don't deny a lot of development. They would probably rather do what they did in this case. They would say, we need you to redesign this in a way that is more appropriate so that you can check the boxes of what we need to have as our findings. So I think that happens more often, where they'll advise the applicant that, this isn't something that we can approve, so you're going to have to, make some changes. I think that probably happens more often than an actual denial. But I don't know if any of those aspects come into this decision or not.
Thank you. And then additionally, I know I reference other 40Bs, but that's the track that we've been running on, is we were given consultation funds that we were awarded as part of that process. Do you think that if we go through this, we will get some additional funding for our Zoning Board of Appeals in terms of consulting resources to help them evaluate these applications?
It's definitely possible. Mass Housing Partnership, who provided the $15,000 grant for an outside consultant to be an advisor to the ZBA. They do give multiple grants to towns. I think they're lesser value. I think they're up to $10,000 for a second or beyond. But they do provide additional grants. That consultant has been very helpful with the other project with the ZBA and just coordination, which can be sometimes challenging with all the different parties that are involved. But at the very least, there would be peer reviews that would be paid for by the applicant that the town would select as a consultant, and there could be additional grants for technical service too.
Thank you for that. Do we apply for that, or so would we be making it a point to apply for that as part of this?
Yes.
As a standard business practice?
Yes, we can apply for that. MHP asks you to wait until a project has site eligibility, and I believe they want the project to have applied with the ZBA before they'll process an application. I don't know if they've ever had multiple going with a town at once. I can look into that to see if that's
Okay.
something that they do.
If you could do that, I would appreciate it, just because, this is a lot to take in, and if it sounds like they're going to at least let it go through the regulatory process and give this application a chance, my belief is that they will. So I just want to be prepared.
Thank you. I concur with my colleagues, and Chairman O'Connell asked the question that I was going to ask about how often they deny them. But coming off of that, once it is approved by Mass Housing, that's it. We have no recourse at that. There's no appeal that we can put forth at that point.
No, I'm not aware of an appeal for that process. It would then come to the Board of Appeals for review, and that's the process where, there's kind of local control, whether
Right.
it's approved or not. And but I'm not aware of an appeal that the town could make for Mass Housing.
Okay. And then let's just say this gets approved with the proposal that's put on the table now with the 12 units. It gets approved, it goes through the process here. At that point, it can, with the back and forth, it could end up getting cut down at some point with town input, or would it, right, it's kind of negotiating, so to speak?
Definitely. The project will need to be able to, meet the standards that we typically see, unless they specifically ask for a waiver and the Board of Appeals is okay with that waiver. So, staff is going to make all of the comments that we always make. They're going to have to show that they have stormwater and, appropriate grading and all of those details. And as a part of that process, it's, it does happen that developments change.
Right.
Yeah.
And then last question. So as Chairman O'Connell mentioned, we have 2 40Bs going on right now, going through the process. If one gets approved before the other, what happens to the one that is still in the process?
So if there's a few scenarios that could play out for timing. So if a project has applied to the ZBA, the ZBA will have to see that project through the entire process. The door kind of shuts to these types of projects once we get over 10%, which there's multiple ways we could do that. If the 100 West Street project is approved, once that decision is filed with the clerk's office, those units will count and will be back over the 10%. The other possibility is that the Princeton development project in North Wilmington, that's still going through the DEP appeal process. If that wraps up and they're able to pull building permits for the units, those units would start to count. So once the minute we get over that 10% mark, the door closes to other projects, but anything that's in the door already would have to be seen through.
Okay. So essentially, if one got approved today and the other two are still in the process with Mass Housing, they pretty much die, or because they haven't been approved by Mass Housing.
Yeah, so, right. So if, let's say, we approve a project tomorrow that puts us over 10%, then we would be able to turn away everyone else
Great.
from the ZBA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate all the work.
So if I can follow up on that, if I may, and I am spotting you, I apologize, is, can you tell us what you know in terms of an update on the other two projects? Because I do think it's relevant, if you could, please.
Yeah,
In
so,
terms of where we are in the timeline.
sure. Starting with the Princeton Development Project, there was an adjudicatory hearing with DEP a few weeks ago. Closing arguments, or sort of the rationale for each side, is due to be submitted to DEP the middle of September. And following that, DEP will have, the presiding officer will have all of the information they need to make a decision on it. But that decision, we don't have a timeline for that. So we don't know exactly when that would happen.
Is there an appeal period for that?
There is an appeal that if the decision that comes out of the adjudicatory process with DEP, that can be appealed to Superior Court. So there is another step that could be taken.
Okay, thank you.
On the 100 West Street development, is before the ZBA currently. There's been 2 public hearings so far, talk about parking spaces, talk about circulation, talk about transportation improvements. We're holding some workshops to hone in on some of the larger issues around what can be reasonably expected from the applicant for upgrades to the transportation network. So we're kind of in the middle of that, I would say, and that process should be wrapping up in the next few months. Hopefully it doesn't drag on. I have high hopes that some things can be talked out and kind of figured out in the near future.
So to that point, with this going forward with Mass Housing and Mr. Busby, does Mr. Busby, upon receipt with his team at Mass Housing, have a certain time frame that they have to reply back to this comment letter such that it gives 79 Nichols an opportunity to go to the next step, because it can't go forward without the Mass Housing determination?
Yeah, Mass Housing has a specific timeline that they use, and that timeline sort of goes into October. So I would expect that their process would wrap up sometime in October, and that's what he suggested as well.
So nobody can forecast, but it doesn't sound like West Street will be done potentially in time to impact this in terms of potentially bringing us over the units.
It is really hard to say.
Okay. Thank you for that. Follow-up?
A follow-up question, if I may.
Sure.
So Valerie, speaking of these projects that are at similar stages, I don't expect it definitive from you, but in your professional opinion, is it likely that Mass Housing, we find ourselves back here in a similar situation where Mass Housing said already once, no, we'd like you to go revisit this? Is that likely could happen again in this project?
For this one, I got, at the site visit that was held, I got the impression that the change in the type of unit, the style of unit, was satisfactory to Mass Housing. But, I can't predict what they would say, but because they're looking at it so generally, it may just check all the boxes that they have. That would be my expectation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Follow-up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Follow-up on Selectwoman Maselli's question, and your response to it kind of threw me off. You said if one of those projects gets approved, then the other two will not happen if they've not gone through the process. I guess what I'm getting at is that the Princeton project was as we referred to it, as a friendly 40B project. We gave approval to that. So are you saying that if West Street goes through or Nichols goes through, well, Princeton is still going through this appeals process, then they could be out of luck in putting in their project? even though
No,
we've
sorry.
approved it?
No, yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
let me clarify that.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
so because Princeton already has their comprehensive permit, that permit is good for a period of, I think, 3 years. So they have their permit, and whatever happens with these other projects won't change that. They have their permit, but I guess what does happen if something happens to take us over that 10%, we wouldn't have to take in new applications to the ZBA. So, for instance, if Princeton moved ahead quickly and they pulled their building permits on, September 30th, we could kind of close the door to any new applications to the ZBA. We'd have to finish out 100 West Street because they've already applied, they're in the process. And when I say that we'd have to see anything through that's in the process, it's anyone who's already applied to the ZBA, our process here locally. So even though they're at mass housing, we wouldn't have to let them in because they're at mass housing. It would be only what's come in the door for the ZBA. It gets a little,
Okay, so, yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
so is West Street in, so am I to guess or gather, they say never to say assume, right? Is West Street in the pipeline?
yeah, so West Street's being reviewed by the ZBA. They applied, months ago. They're being reviewed. So whatever happens, we would see that one through the
Okay.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're in the door. And I think it's an important education factor for the board, people here and listening at home. The comprehensive permit was done for Princeton, but the issue, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they weren't able to apply for a building permit within the 1-year period
Right.
that they had. So even though COVID and with delays and with shutdowns and with the court not operating,
Right.
they were given no relief and they were stalled through the court system. I'm not speaking about how the appeal got to be there, because I know we had an irate resident come in here and make a scene. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just, again, another process that's broken, that they got zero relief in terms of being helped through that situation. And as a result of that, that has completely changed the illustration of this town, like overnight, by an appeal being allowed to be hung up like that with no state relief for that situation. That's wrong. That should be noted. Yes.
If I could, thank you. And just to clarify, point of clarification, on the distinction between the Princeton is that we were, at the time, above 10%, and therefore they didn't have to go to mass housing. Different process. We've subsequently fallen below 10%, and that's why these projects are being treated differently. Am I correct in saying that?
Princeton also went to mass housing and got site eligibility. I guess it wasn't because that project was presented publicly and there was support for it. This meeting didn't happen because it was just a very different proposal. But they did still have to get their letter from mass housing before they could apply to the ZBA. Same process, but it was much different.
And my last question, if I can, is just to clarify, if you could remind me, although Princeton was approved, it's now on the second or third appeal.
So Princeton was approved by the ZBA, and they have their comprehensive permit. They also had to go to, which both of all the projects that we're talking about tonight have to go to the Conservation Commission for another approval. That approval, the Concom approval, is not put in with all of the other approvals with the ZBA. It's still separate. So when Princeton went to get their order of conditions from the Conservation Commission, that order was appealed, and It went through the appeal process, so that was the first one. And then DEP issued a superseding order of conditions. That was appealed. And so there were 2 appeals, and that's where we are today with DEP's internal adjudicatory process being kind of played out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just comment on that last point. You know, one of the things that I think is completely problematic with this process, and I've actually reached out to our legislative delegation, it seems to me in a case like the Princeton property, which was a friendly 40B, so-called friendly 40B, the comprehensive permit was attained and Concom approved it. The premise should be that those units count kind of under the premise that you're innocent until proven guilty. So the units, in my estimation, should count on the town's, towards the town's 10%, and only if the appeals, if the appellant prevails, should those units then be taken off. And instead what we have, and of course it's not going to affect the current circumstances, but those units were never added because an appeal was made. It seems to me the legislation, if that's what it takes, with respect to 40B, should be changed so that if the units go through the local process and are granted approval, they count unless overturned by an appeal.
Right, which is a great point, which is an extension of what I'm saying, that there was no extension granted to hold on to those units so that appeals process could carry through.
Right.
Again, a broken process. So at this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to the public. If anyone here wishes to speak, what I would just kindly ask that we have one speaker at a time. When you come to the mic, I would kindly ask that you please identify your full name for the record and your property address. And I want to give as many people an ample opportunity to speak, but if you can just be mindful of the amount of time that you're using so that you can give everybody in the room an opportunity to speak at the mic if they so choose. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Patrick McInerney. I live at 98 Nichols Street here in town. I have a couple of questions. The first one is about the letters. Will the letter be made public that was written from the town about their comments about the project?
Yes.
And
Yes.
will
Yes.
that be available online?
Yes.
Yes.
And that be available online like by tomorrow so people can read it so that they can then respond back to you if the deadline is by Friday?
So let me just interject and ask a question. Bev, with the correspondence that's added on to the website, do you know if this comment letter is out there? No, sometimes with the agenda that's posted. Okay, so is the comment letter out there as part of the communications? Yes. No, not yet, but eventually, could we put it out there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Will the letter that you received tonight, Builder, be made available and be public?
Yes.
Will that also be posted fairly soon so people can comment before Friday?
Yes, we can
Yes.
certainly have that posted tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. I think that has a lot of information
Yes.
about the traffic. And I think people would like to read, especially in the neighborhood, about what the town is concerned with the traffic and the study. I find it offensive that Nichols Street is considered a cut-through. I think the entire town is a cut-through, personally. And I think just calling it a cut-through really just makes it seem like, it's just to the outside edge of town. You know, it's just a place for one person to go to the other. I emailed Mr. Hull on August 8th about an incident that occurred outside of my house in the traffic. We had a very nice correspondence. Since that August 8th email, I have had 3 more incidents that I've had to report to the Wilmington Police Department about traffic issues of either head-on collisions, people jumping the sidewalk in front of my home, and this Saturday night at 1 a.m. being awoken to 2 drivers being arrested for OUI who crashed into each other. So again, I think by just calling my road a cut-through, I would invite you to come and stand outside of my house in the middle of the day and watch what it's like. I know that there's not much that the police department can do. I know that things have been promised to us. I have those emails. I would like the town to act on those promises before this project goes through. For example, when you say that, the builder is going to design the intersection of 129 and Nichols, what does that mean? And when is the timeline of that? How does the town respond to that? It's nice that he's offering in a letter, but what the town going to do about that? And when? Specifics. Because just taking one resident at a time, sending an email and saying you're, quote, late to the party on this, which I have an email, is not acceptable from a town committee, not acceptable from the police department.
Just as a point of clarification, the late to the party, that isn't something that you received from me or from this board.
That is not something I received from the board, but communication that I received from the police department. I've learned to keep things in email and videos and have concrete
No, I
evidence,
understand that, but you
so
had said a committee or a board, so I just didn't know if there was a correspondence that went out that I didn't see.
I can probably specifically name something else that's beyond the point. I just find it that if you have this letter, you have this draft, why is that not made available to the public before you call this meeting?
Because we have been working to try and get all that information together, to put it in a draft format and meet various deadlines. They had to compile the information. Putting this meeting together was all put together by design. This meeting was not planned. This was specifically designed for you.
So you got the letter, sorry for interrupting, you got the letter,
I got the letter Friday night.
it's Monday?
Correct. Friday night at 5 o'clock. So, we put it publicly that we were going to have the meeting. We received a package that's delivered to us from the police department. We've been communicating, that this meeting is happening. It's in a draft form, and it's going to potentially be revised after tonight. So when you have public communications and you put something out in draft form, it's a draft. And if it's going to be changed, there is a spirit of transparency, which I believe that this meeting is fostering. We have no issues with we just received this letter by 5 o'clock, but in the
Friday.
digital age, 5 o'clock tonight in terms of from the attorney about the applicant
that
not
letter,
being
yes.
here. So we just got it real time when we came in.
That one I'm not as,
But
I would
also
be
too,
concerned
in the
with.
digital age, in terms of, social media and the way the internet can be used as a tool for the good and not for the good, we don't want draft letters just out there haphazardly that are not a complete submission. So I'm fine with the fact that a draft letter isn't canvassed all over the internet or on the website. We can certainly get you a copy of it, but it's going to potentially change.
I think not having the draft letter available before this meeting, it changes some people's opinions. It changed mine as I'm sitting here listening to it. It has changed the questions that I had. I think that's an unfair process to the residents. You can't tell me that you're for the residents. Have this information available to you before the meeting, even if it's a few hours before the meeting, even if it's a draft and you can
Right,
list
and
it
you're
as
getting
a
the
draft.
draft, and you have until Friday to resubmit anything that you want. I know it's not ideal. We are working as hard as we can to try and please everyone in the room. We're getting information real time to you that we have, and apparently we're going to fall short of your expectations.
My opinion is there's a lot of stalling. There's a lot of kicking the can down the curb until it's someone else's problem. So another question that I have.
I understand that you have the right to your opinion.
Another question that I have, the town knows that this project is out there. This town knows that the project has been there for many 40Bs. What is the town doing, for example, if you know that, for example, Nichols Street is a cut-through or has issues, because the town is aware of the Nichols Street issues from what I've been told. You know this project is there. What is the town's response to then fixing part of the Nichols Street problem? Not just saying you're going to fix it, but what is the town's plan?
Well, the challenge is the same as other streets in town, whether you're talking Cunningham or Forest or Glen Road. We have multiple streets that are access ways to other streets, and it's the nature of the situation. There is no way that I'm aware of, and certainly we've looked at Nichols Street and other streets to resolve the prospect that someone from Billerica or Tewksbury or Lowell may want to come down Whipple Road and go through Nichols Street to get to 129 or vice versa. Just as we all use streets in other communities to do the same thing, people have the ability to do that on streets in Wilmington.
Does Cunningham have a 40B proposed project?
It does not.
Forest?
Not currently.
Aldrich?
No.
Lake?
Your point was...
My point is,
point
you
was
know that
about the-
Nichols has a 40B project. You know that Nichols has a traffic problem. The draft of the letter says that it's a cut-through. There's nothing solid in there that says how you're going to address that problem.
And my point is that as Nichols Street is similar to these other streets, people have the ability to go from one street to another. Granted, this is a situation where there's a 40B proposed, but that doesn't change the fact, as you and many other people in the neighborhood have pointed out, that there are challenges because it's a access way from one major street to another. That
People are
doesn't
going to
change-
drive or they're going to drive. That's not my point. You're mincing my words here. My point is the town knows, and you're sitting here telling me, you're telling the residents, that there is an issue with Nichols Street. There is a 40B project. You're concerned about that 40B project. There's a concern for the road. What is the town going to do to
So let me-
respond to those concerns?
So let me respond to that. So this is a conceptual project that's going to continue to change. Every single thing that we do involves your tax dollars to do it. So as this proposal changes, in the municipal world, things do not happen at the consumer rate of speed. We don't just unilaterally as a board get to order a traffic study, tell, a police officer to put a speed bump or to erect a traffic light on a major, town road. There's a whole process that has to go through it. This came to us as quite a surprise. We were blindsided by the letter. We called a meeting immediately. We conveyed in the last meeting that the communication wasn't ideal because of the time frame that we received it. The proposal has since changed. We had a separate site visit, and it continues to be a moving target, and it continues to change. We're relying on the applicant's information. We're relying on the state's information. We could work up all of these different scenarios and come up with solution measures, and then the project is going to change again. So I put the question back to you, sir. What are you looking to be done over there that the town hasn't done? And what is it specifically that you're referencing? Because it sounds like you have a lot of ideas. I'm not disputing the
Sure.
fact that we have issues, but are you looking for a detail officer there 24/7? Are you looking for a traffic light? I mean, I'm not trying to be smart here, but you're awfully
Sounds like it.
critical. You're awfully critical of a board that's trying to open up a forum to just have you bash us back instead of getting at the substantive issues. What are the solutions that you're bringing here
I'm
tonight?
critical of a board.
that
I'm
you-
critical
that
of a
you have to
town
say-
that doesn't have a plan for something that they say
I
that
asked you
they're
if you have
concerned about.
suggestions that you'd like
I do.
to
I've
offer.
had, you
What
can
might
ask
those
Mr. Hull.
be?
I've sent many
You-
suggestions to.
I haven't seen those letters. I asked you that before, and you said it was about other correspondence that took place between you and the police department. I'm not in receipt of that. And you made a comment about late to the party. I don't know where that comment came from, too.
I told you where they came from. They came from the police department.
I don't have any reference of what it's
I can share
for.
all my emails with you.
Please do that. Please do that.
I will forward them to you. The person sitting next to you also has them, and so I'm sorry that
But
I
if
didn't
there
know
are,
that he
if
didn't
there
share
are,
them with
if
you.
there are solutions and suggestions that you'd like to offer rather than being critical and criticize, please do.
Okay,
And
first
please bring your
would be the-
comments to a close to give other people an
the
opportunity to speak.
redesign of Nichols and 129.
We're
and-
not at that stage yet. The proposal hasn't been approved. We're not going to just put forth a proposal to reconstruct an island
I'm not
without a
asking you to
definitive
do it
proposal.
tomorrow. I'm asking
Well, you're already
if the
complaining
town.
that it's not done.
I never complained it's not done. What I'm
Okay.
complaining about is that what is the plan that the town has for
Here's
if
the
the
honest
project
answer.
goes
We
through?
don't have one right now. We don't have one right now.
And part of the reason...
That's
is-
what I'm looking for.
and-
We don't have one right
We
now.
don't have a plan. We
And
don't have a
part
plan.
of the reason
That's
that
what I'm
there is not a
looking for.
plan,
Okay, not a
sir,
plan.
is because, first of all, this application is before the Mass Housing, and they first have to establish whether it's even eligible to go before the Board of Appeals. So there's no point in having a plan if we don't know whether it's going to the Board of Appeals. When it does go to the Board of Appeals, as was previously noted, there will be traffic studies and there will be a direction put forward as to what needs to happen at that intersection. But there's no point in spending tax dollars on bringing engineers out to redesign an intersection when we don't know what the final product of that project is.
So you said that there was a traffic study already done on Nichols Street, and it was done fairly recently, within the past 2 years. That traffic study has no influence on the town looking at the 40B project and writing a draft to make a plan of what would happen if the 40B project went through?
Well, again, why would we do that until we know what the final product of those discussions with the Board of Appeals are if it gets there?
Will that now be done now that the planning board is saying that the assumption from the site was that this project will go through?
I can't speak for the Board of Appeals, but all I can say is that if the Mass Housing authorizes or deems this project to be eligible and it goes before the Board of Appeals, my expectation is, based upon past history with the Board of Appeals, that they will require traffic studies, and the prospect exists that there will be a redesign, or at least a look at a redesign of that intersection. That's a conversation that the Board of Appeals will have with the developer, and ultimately they'll engage in discussions and negotiations with the developer. So at this point, I'm speculating to suggest what will happen.
Madam Chair, on that regarding traffic, would Mass DOT be involved in that, since that would be 129 over there as well? So that's another whole layer.
I don't believe 129 is a state road. So certainly 38, if it was 38, that's a state road. But in this case, I don't think Mass DOT is involved. Valerie?
Yeah, I don't think so either.
It's my knowledge that it's not. My question for you too, Valerie, would be that a traffic study that may have been done 2 years ago, is it typical to use a traffic study from 2 years ago to make any sort of assessments, or would they need to do something more current?
We would expect that they would do a current traffic study with current counts of,
Correct. A lot could change in 2 years.
well, especially with COVID, right?
Correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if the town had a plan, knowing that this was coming forward. Not here to accuse anyone of anything, but I feel like with the attitude I'm getting back is that this is a part of it. We don't like being called out. The town doesn't have a plan, even if it is just a draft. I think that's unfortunate. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing the letter, because I do think to the residents on that road who witnessed someone almost get killed, and the numerous incidents that have been reported to the police in the past month, to say it's just a cut through and just kind of brush it off in that way it's sad that the town would treat it that way, and it's offensive.
I don't think she meant it that way. I have to defend her on that. When she meant a cut-through, just like Mr. Hull was saying, a passway, it was just a term. She didn't mean any disrespect by it.
Well, I'm allowed to feel disrespect by
You
living
are,
there.
you are, but you're not allowed to just sit here and bash us and us to take it. You know
I'm
what I mean?
not bashing
It
you.
doesn't make sense for the town to have a plan when we don't know if it's 40, what's going on with the 40B. We can't make a plan. If we make a plan and then they come through and the plan that we made doesn't fit for what the 40B is. We have to wait and follow the process, and if the 40B gets approved, then we'll have a comprehensive traffic plan. But the town should not have a plan right now in conjunction with the 40B. We need to wait for that.
And I understand
No
that.
one's kicking anything down the road here.
I'm not bashing anybody.
Okay.
I am just saying that the issues on Nichols Street, the town is aware. Town has
I
been
don't
aware.
deny that. I don't deny that. There are issues there.
So
But what you're talking
they're
about is a
just-
plan in
I was just
conjunction
curious
with
if
the
the town
40B.
has a plan.
And you said knowing
And you
there's a 40B. You're tying that plan into the 40B. That's how you're presenting it here tonight. And we're telling you emphatically that we cannot have a plan until we know what's going on with the 40B. You cannot put the cart before the horse. It doesn't make sense. That's all I'm saying. Because then we're going to be criticized for doing a plan before we knew what the plan was. So, like, you know.
Well, I'm not asking for a detailed plan. I'm just asking if the town had, if they take the information that they already have about the situation and then start to formulate
To
something to
answer your
get ahead of
question,
it.
every single thing that comes across, every single email, every single everything, we talk 7 days a week,
Yep, we
morning,
do.
noon, and night. I don't take days off being on this board. We don't.
Nope.
So I understand that you're offended. I'm offended too by your demeanor as well. We can agree to disagree. There are a lot of other people that came down here that might like to speak.
I
We can have a
understand. I'm
difference
sorry.
of
I've taken up too
opinion.
much time.
If you relook at the tape and you place it back and own your part of it, I'll certainly own mine.
I've already
We have
owned
work-
mine. I
We
already
have work to
apologized.
do on this, and we're going to do it. Okay, we're going to
Sorry,
work.
didn't mean to offend you. I'm not.
Have a good night, sir.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you.
Evening, Board. Dave Robertson, 7 Middlesex Ave. I had a question for Mr. McDonald. He only had one, surprisingly, but had to step out. He asked to see if we could have an exact number of just how many units we're short at the moment for our 40B guidelines.
I don't have it on the top of my head,
Okay.
but it is less than 100.
Okay, thank you. That's all he asked. So to give a little bit of context, and things are a little bit tense here, but there was a similar project proposed right on the Tewksbury-Andover border. It was going to be the largest construction project actually outside of Boston. And if I may, Madam Chair, I'll keep it short, but just to explain to the audience in hopes of kind of the timeline and expectations and when to strike and what have you. So Tewksbury obviously was quite concerned because Andover was unilaterally kind of considering only themselves in this. And it would have disrupted 3 of the major, for lack of a better term, cut-throughs, Shawsheen Street, East Street, and then a bit of Dascom Road, if I recall. So the condition portion came at the next step past mass housing. This is sort of just like, and Ms. Greengrass could correct me if my comparison is not exactly accurate, but this is almost in a sense sitting with your bank officer looking for an expansion. You're going to have to go through the process anyways. So when we went and had the second site visit, we were quite happy to see that there was a walk back from 40 to 12 units. And I don't mean to speak for everybody in this audience, would still like to see a minor reduction for it that more reflects the rest of the area, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. I agree with them, though, on the traffic and the overall kind of drainage and then line of sight / spacing issues. So within my letter, I'll go down each of those. And first of all, the gentleman, I don't know if he left, but when it comes to traffic, one thing Mr. De Palma, who I know isn't here this evening, but had brought up was the exploration of one of the conditionals asking the developer, regardless of the amount of units, seek either through his own financing or through a MassWorks grant application that, if it's acceptable, Senator Tarr and I can help push for what they call road dieting, particularly around the edge of, the end of Nickel Street up by the school. It's wider. It gives a perception, especially for those coming and veering onto the street, that their speed is much lower than it truly is. So by decreasing the width of the road, as long as we keep in the drainage factor, makes it seem like you're going faster at a slower speed. Now, that is pretty much the gold standard for what the Department of Transportation is looking for now. Another alternative that we brought up, and again, I know this isn't exactly 100% appropriate, but I just wanted to telegraph to Mass Housing, the town, and the developer some of the concerns and possible solutions of the residents, was looking at a elevated sidewalk on either side of the bridge. Because my opinion that the folks, especially from other towns, and I know Mr. Hall in the past, and we've had conversations about truck routes and truck exclusions based on the residents' concerns, we're going to get a fight from the other towns because of this. Massachusetts law requires that if we have a truck route, it doesn't. I can't fault Barica for them just saying they're going to go up to the Shell station, hook a right, and come right back down. I wish we could do it, but if it was inverse, I'd feel like I can't say it on public access. But the elevated crosswalk would certainly be a dissuading factor. One, because it shows up when it slows traffic on the live action GPSs that everyone uses nowadays, but also just local words. Those who commute that way would be dissuaded to go down alternative routes of sorts. We have to balance that with the other neighborhoods. But I think a little bit of financial pain for anyone that's speeding, that's the thing. I'd rather have a crosswalk than another person, and they're going to learn their lesson. And we could even start to kind of move that way now by asking them, the DPW and the Department of Transportation, just to provide some of the heavy-weighted pedestrian cross signs, simply because of the narrowness at Nichols, gives that subconscious kind of squeeze where people are going to slow down. And if they hit the sign, let's face it, it's a sign. But that bastard should be buying a new bumper to ensure that someone else walking their dog doesn't get suffered from a hit or an injury again. So traffic's the number one concern, and I think there is a potential there, especially if the property developer utilizes MassWorks grants, because that's what the Andover property was doing. Much, much larger scale. They were going to overdo the railroad sidewalks as well as redesign 2 intersections based on that. And this is a much relatively smaller project, but it gives the state a little more kind of bang for the buck in this sense. And then also in my letter, I asked the, based on the right to build to 5 houses, I asked the developer to consider where a lot of the neighbors have the very valid point of asking for consideration on the setback or lines of sight into their property, particularly among the front 2. It's kind of a wonky look because they're going to be parallel or perpendicular to the road, whichever one, rather than the front facing the road like most places. So I asked, because it would also help with decreasing the non-permeable surface, that a developer would be willing to do 10 units but 5 split houses of sorts. So in a sense, it would appear and it would drain just as 5 single-family homes, but instead they would be able to get 10 units at balance in there. Particularly concerned, but Madam Chair, you and your fellows already addressed historic impact on the wetland site as well as the canal, so I won't belabor those points. But I also want to let this, I know it can get a little tense, but I do want to let the folks know that Mr. Hall has brought up, and I think Chair O'Connell brought up a great point. There is a very valid fault of the state on this, one with the court process and not being honored. It was kind of neglected. But also, we're in a particularly frustrating place, and Senator Tarr can say it much more eloquently than I, but there's a force by Boston to alleviate the housing demand. And it's not a bad thing that people want to live here. It's a bit of a silver lining, like traffic means most people are productive and going to work or buying things and doing such. But it certainly feels us out in the periphery feel like we're between a rock and a hard place, because while the governor's pushed certain things like the MBTA Communities Act, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg, which we're responsible to raise the egg. We need to find the financial dough for potentially larger projects like this down the line. But that's a whole separate thing, but they have been very vocal about it, because Wilmington, Tewksbury, Andover's, the Reddings, the North Reddings are kind of be asked to carry this heavy burden for what I feel like was kind of retarded growth by Mayor Menino back in the day in the city of Boston. He slowed it. A lot of us moved out here because we couldn't afford closer now. And this is just my personal opinion. The towns are being asked to pick up the slack while we are not really being financially supported by the urban center. But that's a whole other separate issue. So again, just to recap, we'll be asking the applicant to consider MassWorks funds when they reach that, and ask for the board for an order of conditions just to see what road dieting and road safety we can do, be it raised sidewalks, speed detector, signs, et cetera, et cetera. I've asked the applicant to see if he'd be willing to do 10 units across 5 buildings, no bigger than your normal family single housing in the area. And then also redesign the wetlands a little bit more, just to further ensure that the offlow isn't disrupting those around them, especially the canal.
Thank you for that. Just as a follow-up, you
Yes.
had referenced a letter multiple times. Is this a letter that you're submitting
I'm
to
sorry.
Mass Housing? Is this a letter that's going
Yes,
to be
Madam Chair.
published? Is this a letter that
Yeah, I'm
we're
happy
going
to.
to receive as a board to know
Yes,
where our delegation sits?
yes, I plan to. I plan
Okay.
to send it there. I've rewritten the draft 3 times now. I wasn't too happy with it a little bit before, and it's just seeing what is kind of the gold standard for traffic calming technology at the time. And it's certainly an interesting world out there in civil engineering. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Would anyone like to speak as well? Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Lynn Webster. I live at 121 Church Street. And I did want to very much reiterate the points that were made.
Excuse me.
Yes. Can you hear me?
No, she didn't get the information.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I don't like being this close. I was a
If you can
dog
just,
walker.
sorry, if you can just restate your name and address.
Lynn
just-
Webster, 121 Church Street.
Thank you.
My family has been in Wilmington for as long as I know they've been in the United States. My great-grandmother is in Wilmington Cemetery, as are 3 of my grandparents right now. And I don't know where the other one is. Actually, no, he's there too. Sorry. I was a dog walker in town until, well, I got sick. And the driving across the towns, Wilmington, Billerica, Tewksbury, Andover, is what I did all day, as well as walking across those towns. So the last 2 speakers who both mentioned traffic and safety on the roads, those are things that I experienced every day at all times of the day. People who drive too fast, yes, it happens all the time. The heightened curb on the sidewalks absolutely slows people down, but I can't tell you how many turtles I have picked up out of the road and moved. So while this site is by the wetlands, I do think that at some point the environmental considerations should be laid into play because nobody likes little dead animals. It's a bad look. As I am disabled right now, I'm sorry, I do have a horse in the race because I have a problem working, and that means I can't really afford regular housing like most people can. The track is on fire, and I'm sorry, I have a horse in the race. That doesn't mean I can't tell you what's going on. Between 5 and 30% of COVID survivors are going to have long-term COVID. And I'm in a position to speak to you on that issue and how it's going to actually hit people. The single-family houses and the duplexes are the way to go for our housing, as opposed to large apartment complexes with tons of stairs where you've got to walk a quarter mile to a dumpster to throw out your trash. Somebody with chronic fatigue literally cannot carry their groceries into the house. Somebody with reduced lung capacity cannot walk up 3 flights of stairs. And that is something that is going to kick us in the teeth in about 10 to 20 years. And I do very much applaud the state and the town for addressing this issue now, and for addressing this issue with smaller single-family homes and duplexes, because it will make a world of difference to the people who are here and to the people who want to be here. I know I can drive down Eldridge Road, and I can say, that's where my grandfather's farm used to be. It's not anymore. New houses get built all the time, and we have to adjust our roads to meet them. Roads that aren't much in use anymore, they don't need as much maintenance. But if roads are going to be in use more, then there does need to be a plan. I know you mentioned don't put the cart before the horse. Absolutely, I agree. But at some point, you actually know what the cart looks like, though. You look at the cart and you say, hey, it's got to have round wheels. It's got to have a part to attach. So while an exact plan of that, I don't expect it right away, but is any part of that included to form an actual plan, included with the housing plan? No, that was a question.
Valerie,
Oh,
I'm going to turn to you on this in terms of the Board of Appeals process. In terms of the comprehensive permit, can you talk outside of the building of the actual units, what they do in terms of the road and the utilities and any sort of curbing leading into that housing project? To what extent does the Board of Appeals get outside of the actual housing development and mitigate some of the items that this lovely woman has spoken about?
Sure. So first, we'll want them to do a traffic study to look at the project's impacts on the roadway network. And based on that traffic study, depending on how badly they're impacting the network, they would be expected to contribute or make improvements to make up for their impacts. So while
So we would be receiving funding to not only do the study, but to also make improvements as needed? Is that what?
I think it all depends. It's not with a smaller development like this, comparatively to
Yes.
developments that we've seen. We'll have to see what it gets very technical, right? So the traffic engineers will look at that traffic study and they'll say, okay, this development is impacting the roadway network with, 5 more cars during the morning commute or something like that, right? And they'll try to put a value on that, or if there are actual physical impacts that are being identified, maybe they'll have to design the project, move the entrance to avoid a conflict within the roadway. Maybe they'll have to change some of the, trim vegetation so that there's better sight lines to see when you're pulling out of the roadway. All of those things are covered in a traffic study that is then peer-reviewed by an independent traffic reviewer and discussed by the board. So the board looks at the project itself, and then they'll look at what impacts is the project creating to the larger outside network.
Okay, and in regards to construction vehicles and all of that moving along the road, will there be any consideration to those temporary?
That would be something that the board could discuss.
Okay, and would results from safety regarding those temporary restrictions be considered?
So,
For example, if a stoplight is put at the bridge, the project is right by the bridge, right? Or the entrance would be near the bridge? So if a stoplight was put there, for example, during construction, and it was found that there were no accidents during that time, a magical number, I know, but if that was found, would the stoplight be considered as a more permanent solution?
that would be beyond the scope of that actual
this
project.
meeting?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
it sort of goes beyond just that development project, whether changing that roadway, whether adding something like that, that would have to be looked at in the larger network of not just Nickel Street, but, Shawsheen and beyond, all of those, to, first of all, make sure that whatever happens is safe for everybody, and appropriate to meet the goals that are trying to be met. So it would be beyond this development.
And the environmental considerations, would that be included within the project or considered after?
So
Just as far as wetlands and wildlife goes?
So the project has to be reviewed by the Conservation Commission,
Okay.
which would look at the wetlands and the impacts to the wetlands and discuss whether those impacts are adequately mitigated by whatever they're proposing as mitigation. And that would be a separate process that stands alone from the Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak at this time?
Hi, Tom O'Brien, 124 Nickel Street. How's everybody doing this evening? Thanks for having this for. I've spoken before with you folks. My concern, and I know we'll have a meeting on traffic on Nickel Street. As the gentleman that was a couple of speakers ago, he was asking you, well, what's the plan, what's the solution? I think he was looking for some solutions now, because we really do have problems down there, as you admit you are aware of. I have a couple of suggestions. Flashing speed signs. Oh, the people go through them too fast. Well, how come there's one on Salem Street, Cherry Street, Shawsheen Street, and Glen Road, right out here? If they don't work, why is the town spending almost $13,000 per sign? Can anyone answer that? I don't think there is an
Madam Chair,
answer.
Well, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I had this discussion with the town manager about putting that into the budget for next year, to get that flashing sign there. We have one on Woburn Street where I live, speaking of cut-through street, especially with the construction that's going on now. Backing out of my driveway is kind of risky at this point in time. But
miss Woburn Street.
understand. But I have had that discussion with the town manager, and I believe that there is consideration looking into that.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look into that. The Shawsheen sign that you referenced, in talking with our Public Works Director, he's indicated that he's been told by one of the residents down there who is in that general area that in some instances, people will speed up just for the sake of dialing up the speed. So, you know, the challenge is that there is no silver bullet, so to speak, with regard to, you know, one step that's going to resolve the issue. We can certainly put up more signs, but I think, quite frankly, signs become white noise. I think to some measure there may even be a measure of that with respect to these digital signs. Certainly that can be looked at, but again, I don't think that's going to be the panacea to either the volume of traffic that comes through there or the speed of traffic that comes through there.
Sir, as you and I have discussed in correspondence, I don't know if you remember it, we went over that. We had a meeting with the police almost 2 years ago now, and we said, volume, we can't do anything about it. We can't. It's impossible. We can get more patrols down there. They can't be down there 24 hours a day. We understand that. We need deterrence, and we don't have any. Currently, there are 4 speed limits on Nickel Street. It's approximately 1/8 of a mile long, 20 miles an hour, 25, 30, and 35. What's the speed limit? We don't know. I give you Parker Street in Wilmington. It's approximately 4/10 of a mile. It's 25 miles an hour all the way down, straight as an arrow. I know the state sets these limits, but that's what we're asking. We're asking for some deterrence, something to slow people down. We can't stop the volume. And flashing speed signs, I don't care what anybody says. I pay attention to them. I bet everybody on this board pays attention to them. I'll bet most of the people in this audience pay attention to them. And you say, oh, they make people go faster. One resident told you that? It's not acceptable. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. To me, it's not acceptable. And one other thing, you ask any of you folks, you can come down on my deck and watch the traffic in the morning from 5:30 a.m. until about 8 o'clock. You can't even know they're going so fast. Pickup trucks, etc. Excuse me, sir, I'm not done. Can I finish? I have one more thing to say. You ask any delivery truck driver, oil, the mailman, Amazon, what's the most dangerous street in Wilmington to deliver on? Nickel Street. Ask any of them. They're petrified. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
If I could, just the gentleman referenced the digital signs, and it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have, Mr. Hull, I believe a couple of those that are, you can move them around, right? I believe there was one recently at the beginning of the summer, I believe it was on Burlington Ave, and it's since moved. I actually drove by the day that I think the town electrician was taking it down. I'd love to see that on Nickel Street. I know that's it's a Band-Aid, but I'd love to see if we could get that over there through you, Madam Chair, to the manager, if we could request, temporarily, obviously.
I think that would be a great idea because it might be a test to see if there's a digital sign on a temporary basis. What does that do? Is that going to have any effect whatsoever on the speed? Yeah. If it doesn't, then it's probably not worth putting the $13,000 or whatever the cost is for a permanent speed sign.
We had a meeting with the police in January of 2021. We were promised that sign periodically. No one's seen it.
So I'd like to take it one step further, if I may. In addition to that, I think it should be an action item to have an internal meeting. I would be happy to participate as the chair of the Board of Selectmen with the police chief and with the traffic enforcement officer and with you as the town manager and Jamie McGaldy from DPW and talk this through again. I was not on the board during that time. That's not to pass the buck, but I'd like to revisit the whole area and go line item by line item what's been discussed and what can be done. This is not, we're here to support you. I know that people are upset about what has gone on there. We can all state our cases as to what we know about the town, how long we've lived here, where we travel, and I respect that. We designed this meeting to have you in to hear from you, but you need to understand that, we don't operate on lightning speed. We can't talk to each other because it's a violation of the open meeting law. We had to schedule this meeting for even to get the 5 of us in the room to talk. That is not an excuse, but when we get memos on a Friday or a Saturday or Sunday, we don't have the means to just call you all at home, get a traffic study ordered, get a plan together, revisit an intersection or have the authorization to even spend your tax dollars to do that. Things don't happen at that rate of speed. I understand that that's not a satisfactory answer, but please know that no one wants to see your area of enjoyment where you've spent your lives to own your homes and raise your families, you're paying your mortgages, you're paying your tax dollars. We would not have signed up to do this meeting just to come in here and not want to hear from you. We hear what you're saying. We're not pleased with the density of the project. There are issues. We understand that. So I'm here to let you know that we want to revisit this. We'll look at it. I can't promise you what the outcome will be on any of this, but the only way to get things to move forward is to get us all in one room and get us talking, and to do so in a civil manner that we can work this out. So would anyone else like to speak at this time?
Hugh Vandermark, 81 Nichols. Madam Chair, members of the board, I do appreciate you being here. It's August. Ms. Gingrich, where's the applicants? They don't have enough respect for you, for us, to even show up and come here and represent their proposal. It's just unfathomable to me that they don't have it in themselves to be here. Mangano, Golden Realty, the attorney, nobody's here. I appreciate you guys being here and having this meeting. And I'm not here to beat you up about letters you received Friday at 5 o'clock or 5 o'clock today. I believe that you are doing the best you can, but we do need to be informed as soon as possible on what's going on here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. Kevin McDonald, 140 Andover Street. In terms of the town being able to do something, I just want to offer a solution. The town has many vacant buildable lots in town that are worth a lot of money. The town could actually sell these properties and designate that money for the construction of its own affordable housing, and we wouldn't have this problem anymore. This is one project, probably in the line of many to come. Mr. Robertson was kind enough to ask the question about the amount of units that were deficient. So if we just say that it's 100 units, if the town started an exploratory committee to take a look at what it would take, what it would cost, and where we could site it to put its own affordable housing so that we meet the threshold, I think that would be a good thing. I can't stay for the rest of the meeting. I mainly came here for public comment time, and so I just want to put this out to you because I have to leave. September is Cancer Awareness Month, and several meetings ago, Madam Chair, I asked you to see if you would convene a forum to invite the community down, whoever it took to get down here and get justice for Wilmington. There is a rapid movement to get the Olin site developed. It's my personal opinion, based on the fact that the Department of Public Health put out a publication that the childhood cancer in Wilmington came from that site. We have not gotten any justice for the people of Wilmington, the children of Wilmington, and the other people that got cancer. And so, just a simple question. Are you willing or not willing to take the lead to have a forum and get this issue out to the public and get a forum that actually accomplishes something?
So to answer your question, after the meeting that you had brought that forward, I've had probably no less than 5 hours of meetings with the town manager regarding the legal matters of the town, which includes that very topic. And I had conveyed your comments again to the manager in our one-on-one session. We discussed it, and we feel that we need to have an executive session with our board and with our town attorneys, all of our attorneys that are involved, and have a discussion about the factors that we believe would potentially be in play, what the scope of that assignment would look like, if it's something that we would need to present to the public, because we would obviously, if we were to litigate, we would need to use tax dollars to do that. So we need to have an executive session because it is a legal matter. So the answer is yes, we plan to do that, and we have some dates that we're targeting to do that. We want to make sure all the attorneys can be present. We are not ready to bring that to a public forum because we feel that we need legal counsel opinion prior to opening it up to any public forum to talk about some of the legal ramifications and to make sure that we do our due diligence on that and know, do we have any recourse? What are the areas that we could potentially litigate? What are some of the areas that we can't? An exhaustive level of legal questions that I think would be detrimental to the town, to air those questions in a public manner because it could be detrimental to our case. But I will state to you directly that I have taken your comments very seriously. I have made the time, I have modified my work schedule to come in during business hours to seek the very issue that you've brought forward. This isn't lip service. The manager can corroborate what I'm saying, and that we are seriously looking into it. We have to be mindful of what it will cost. That is not to say that any family or any person that has been affected by this does not deserve any sort of assistance in this regard. But to do this, it is not my money to do it. It's the town's money to do it. It's the people's money to do it. And we have to go about it in a very systematic and methodical way to bring something like that to a public forum.
And, thank you. Can you share with us those targeted dates that you have for that meeting?
We're looking at either the end of September or October.
Okay. Is there a particular reason why it's that far out?
Just because we have other executive sessions matters that need to be discussed, so that is.
And also attorney availability.
Okay. My only concern is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, I thought I heard Mr. Hull say that one of his priorities is to get the Olin site developed. And so,
Well, you can
I'll
stand corrected on that, Mr. McDonald. I've never said that my plan is to get the Olin site developed, so I'm not sure where you heard that, but that's categorically not accurate.
okay, I thought I heard it at the town meeting. It might be on tape, but it wasn't that you said it was your plan. I thought you said it was a priority.
Certainly, we will entertain responsible development on the site, but it's not my priority to see the Olin site fully developed. What I will say is that Superfund sites, and part of the mandate that EPA operates under for Superfund sites, is that they restore them to a point, or they have them restored to the point that they can be used in some marketable manner. There is, in many of these sites, a circumstance where over time, and it could be 20 or 30 or 40 years, just like the property down the road in Woburn, that property ultimately was developed or restored to a point where development did occur on that. So the thought that we can forever keep that property undeveloped, I think, is probably not realistic. Do I think that responsible development can happen there? Yes, but it's not my priority to develop that property.
Okay, I'll tell you the problem that I have with that.
Madam Chair, can I just, I don't mean to cut you off.
I know, but you'd be
Mr.
in
McDonald.
conflict of interest because your brother's a
Well,
proponent there.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Isn't he?
But this,
But let's
we
have-
have, I think we should, if he wants to stay for public comments, but you have
I
many
can't stay.
residents
Okay,
out
but we shouldn't be
here
making the exception.
that
Excuse
we
me, let me
hear-
just rule your comments out of order. You need to refrain from making public outbursts relative to that. If you
Okay,
can
I apologize
bring
for
your-
that.
Bring your matter to a close.
I'm just going to say what I have a problem with. If the town can get justice and have a legal matter where it has a lien on that property, okay? That would be something that I would like to see. The problem that I have is if the manager is thinking positive about getting that site developed, I'm not so sure that he is the guy that you should be consulting with in terms of representing the town and the best interests of the community, especially those who were impacted
I'm going
by
to
the childhood
interrupt
cancer.
you.
That's
I'm
what all I have to
taking-
say.
Correct, and I'm taking your comment as in one sense, a personal attack towards the town manager. He is not positive about wanting to develop. He gave you an answer. It was a business answer. I understand you've conveyed your feelings before about Discovery and that if it's redeveloped or repurposed, that any sort of evidence towards any sort of case could be tainted or alleviated such that it would not be admissible into any sort of litigation. Again, we are going to have that meeting and we're going to discuss our options. I
Okay.
do not feel that Mr. Hull, in my opinion, and based on my professional experience, that he is working against the town in this regard and is not a neutral party to be able
Okay.
to handle this.
I would just like to see the meeting sooner rather than later, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You too. Would anyone else like to speak regarding 79 Nichols?
Very quick. This will be back to 79 Nichols. Anthony Frucciano, 7 Ohio Street. When I moved to Wilmington 30 years ago, I was told that there was a minimum requirement per home of 10,000 square feet. Is that still a minimum requirement, or have things changed? Or am I wrong to begin with?
Valerie, do you want to answer that, please?
So our residential single-family districts, the smallest lot size you're allowed to have is 10,000 square feet.
Okay. And the letter that you read to start with, I believe, said that there was 7,000 plus per each of these 11 buildings. So isn't that also enough to kind of slow some of this down or further reduce it?
So a 40B development gets to override our zoning requirements. So while any other lot would have to be 10,000 square feet to build a house on it, they don't have to have that size lot because they get to sort of override the local bylaws.
Amazing. Okay.
So that's similar to the comments when I talked about the no sewer and the fact that 40B, they may get relief and be allowed sewer. Same thing. So basically everything at a local level that we would normally govern anyone else with a standard building application through the 40B process, they stand to have relief in any one of those requirements.
But we have to live with it.
Correct.
Great.
Hi, I'm Michelle Landry. I live at 134 Nichols. It's the very last house.
You can adjust the mic if you'd like.
Yeah, it is kind of high. Yeah. 134 Nichols, the last house before the bridge. I'm famous. I am very late to the party, to use a line from earlier in the meeting. I had just found out about this recently from JR. I just want to go on the record to say I lived on Reed Street, years ago when Pouliot Place was being fought out. And, that lower income housing is great. I know I have friends there, and like the woman before said, we need places for people that can affordably come in. Pouliot Place is a roundabout. It just lends itself to that. Nichols Street is a cutoff. It's a speedway. It's like Germany. I mean, it's just the Autobahn at 7 a.m. It doesn't lend itself to multiple units. We just can't absorb it. Speed bump, speeding traps. I for sure need a light on the corner of Nichols going by the bridge. That's a whole separate issue. But I just wanted to go on the record as saying I just don't think we can absorb it. I think it's going to be miserable. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time? Thank you. So in closing, just wanted to give a friendly reminder that you do have the option to submit more comments by Friday to the town manager's office. Whatever we can put out publicly, we'll put it on the website. As I had commented before, the draft was not put out there because it was a draft. It may be changed. Anything that you may want to submit, if you have any questions, you can certainly contact the town manager's office. Our emails are online as well, so if you want to write to your selectman, you always have access to us as well. In closing, I did indicate in the meeting that I would be talking with the manager and revisiting some traffic options with the police chief and the town manager. And at this point, you know, in terms of future communication, the town understands in the town manager's office that you want to be notified, and we'll be asking you to please make sure that you look at the town's website on a regular basis, and we'll do our best to get that communication out. And I thank you all very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Valerie, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Valerie.
you. Thank you.
In the other lane, yeah.
Thank you for that. Noted. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Hey, just one thing.
Just so you know, the mic is live, so everyone's listening at home. So, okay. Sure. Yes, we would, please. Thank you. So I'd like to ask for a motion for 5 minutes for a recess.
So moved.
Make a motion to recess.
Second.
Sure.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Sure.
Oh, yes. How is she doing? People left and I'm hot.
So at this time, I would like to reconvene the Wilmington Board of Selectmen of Monday, Wilmington Board of Selectmen meeting of Monday, August 22nd, back to order. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the town manager for communications, please.
Yes, so first of all, we have the next three items under communication, and I won't go into the particular details, but the first being from Kevin Donovan, comments with speaking to the proposed development at 79 Nichols Street. Also, a letter from Kadri Dagley and Renee Smith, also with respect to 79 Nichols Street, and then an email from Mr. Tom O'Brien, again commenting on the 79 Nichols Street. We have correspondence from Kelly Gunnigan, Assistant Attorney General, with regard to the town meeting, April 30th of 2022, the town meeting votes, and the various actions taken at town meeting were approved. Article 44, which was seeking to amend the bylaws through renumbering and recaptioning. This was a product of the bylaw study committee that was approved. Article 45, again, to amend the inhabitant bylaws in a more substantive manner in some instances. That was approved. Article 47, to amend the bylaws, changing reference from the Board of Selectmen to Select Board, approved. Article 48, to amend the zoning bylaw to name Board of Selectmen the Select Board, again approved. Article 50 was an amendment to the zoning bylaw, revising site design standards. And then Article 51, amending the zoning bylaw by making revisions with respect to pet care facilities to include them in neighborhood mixed use. There was a caveat with respect to Article 45 in a couple of categories. The Attorney General's office notes that the town made changes to the underground storage tanks provisions, and the AG's office noted that responsibility for oversight has changed from the Department of Fire Services and the Board of Fire Prevention Regulations. It's now under DEP, and suggested that perhaps a future amendment should acknowledge DEP's responsibility. And then secondarily, noting that within the bylaws that were revised, reference was made to fines associated with double poles from utility companies, and they cite a 2005 Supreme Judicial Court decision, Boston Edison versus Town of Bedford, which struck down the town's bylaw regulating double poles, and again suggested that we consult with council going forward to modify that.
So Jeff, one question if I may, like, for example, with the select board, in that they've basically approved that, can you talk about the next steps for us in terms of when we would have to make changes? And isn't there another legislative process that needs to happen as well, just so that we're
Yes.
following that order, so to speak?
Right. So the other element of this was the home rule petition to modify the Town Managers Act. Beverly has been checking online. I've also had periodic conversations with our legislative delegation. I think the last time Beverly noted it was in the third reading. Yeah, so it is winding its way through the process.
Okay.
So
More to follow on that, basically.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Good enough.
The next item is a memo from me to the board with respect to the MSBA project for the Wildwood School, requesting that the board make a motion, which would be considered under board to consider, authorizing the town manager to sign the feasibility study agreement, which is really the next step in the process. This feasibility study agreement essentially details the responsibilities of the town and MSBA regarding the project. It is a document, as town council noted, that it cannot be modified. I did forward it to council, but it is essentially as is. Next is a memo from me with regard to the town school admin building committee, the latest update. And the last meeting, or this memo references a meeting that took place on August 10th. It referenced that test borings were being completed the following week, I believe, and once that information came back, all of that information in conjunction with the work of the architect would be going to the cost estimator. One of the issues that the committee focused on was a review of three approaches, so to speak, to the main entrance to the building, and one included an angled canopy over the entrance with a second smaller overhang, which is referenced as a pediment below the second-story window. A second option was a flat canopy with this same pediment piece below the second-story window. And then the third option was a set of columns supporting a short roof similar to the high school. And ultimately, the committee instructed the architect to pursue that third option. Also, we have a memo to the board with regard to the Senior Center Building Committee. They met on the 17th of August. The owner's project manager provided the cost estimate, which includes architectural services, project management services, construction and furnishings equipment. This number, I think, is, I would believe that it's essentially as is. There may be some minor modifications, but subject to any alterations to the scope. $17,129,175. Obviously, that is much higher than we were anticipating, product of where we are, I think, in terms of the construction environment. Considered possible alternatives that were not included in the scope, one being emergency generator, this so-called bidirectional amplifiers, which are devices that are installed in the building if it's determined that police and fire have difficulty communicating in the building. These are items that potentially could be included in the scope as a add-alt. If the price came in within budget, those could be added. That was one thing that was talked about. There was some discussion about things that perhaps could be parsed out of the project, including looking at the number of pickleball courts, reducing the size of the patio, changing the patio surface, and there were a few other items along those lines. So the committee was tasked with taking a look at the cost estimate, and at the meeting on August 31st, there'll be further discussion about whether the scope can be modified. Next is a memo from the Assistant Town Manager regarding the appointment of a sealer of weights and measures. So for the last, let's say, in excess of 10 years now, we have contracted for these services with the state, the Division of Standards. So there's a requirement that everything from gas pumps to the scales at the various grocery stores to truck scales, that those be tested on a regular basis to confirm that the weights are as they are indicated. Just this past May, I believe it was, I received word from the state that they would no longer be performing that service for the town because our population was in excess of 20,000. We were not alone. My colleagues in Burlington and Wakefield received similar notices. So as a consequence, we were responsible for finding an alternative through Susan Inman's efforts in talking to actually the sealer in North Reading. He was familiar with a gentleman who actually lives in Wilmington, Richard Schultze, goes by the name of Evans, expressed interest in providing these services to the town. So he has been appointed to this position. He'll be going for training in September. And then also the Division of Standards has indicated they will assist him in becoming familiar with that process.
Madam Chair, a question on this. So Previously, the town paid $5,000 per year for the person to come out and do this work.
Yes.
Is this individual now going to be a new employee of the town, or what's the pay scale of something?
So this will be a part-time role. The pay is going to be $7,000, and then we pay for mileage on a quarterly basis, be about $400, so the total will be $7,400.
Thank you.
Next is a memo also from the Assistant Town Manager with regard to the Memorandum of Understanding with Wilmington Community Television. As you know, WCTV has been in place for many, many years. Actually, they had just incorporated when I started here in '87. And I think there was an agreement at one point, but it has since lapsed, and there has been a concerted effort now to develop this memorandum of understanding that establishes roles and responsibilities both for WCTV and the town in terms of the programming that's covered, the meetings that are covered, and so on. The board has a copy of the MOU, and we provided this to you with some advance notice with the thought that this would be brought forward at your meeting on the 12th for the board to take action.
Okay, moving on to the board to consider items.
The first item under board to consider is authorizing the town manager to execute the feasibility study agreement with the Massachusetts School Building Authority for replacement of the Wildwood School. I would recommend that the board make the following motion to delegate authority to serve as the appointed government official with full legal authority under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and all applicable local charters, ordinances, and bylaws to execute and deliver the feasibility study agreement and any amendments thereto on behalf of the town of Wilmington, and to bind the town of Wilmington to its terms and conditions, and further to make final binding decisions on behalf of the town of Wilmington with respect to the proposed project described in the feasibility study agreement and any amendments thereto. So this would be to vest that responsibility with the town manager. This was the practice that was taken for the high school project. Certainly any actions that are taken obviously will have consultation with this board and the finance committee and the Wildwood, ultimately the Wildwood committee that will be overseeing this process.
Would anyone like to make a motion as presented by the manager?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
The next request under board to consider is two additional election workers. The town clerk is seeking appointment of two additional election workers for the upcoming primary. In the November election, she did tell me in conversation about this that normally there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 election workers that are involved. One of the challenges with the primary is that many of the folks that would typically volunteer, given that proximity to Labor Day, are not available. So this would assist in that effort.
Move to grant the request.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
And the next request is from Stephen Firestein, volunteer director, and Dr. Amy Firestein, volunteer clinical services director from Kids Cancer Connection, with regard to a proclamation. I would ask that the board table this based upon additional information that I'm looking to obtain about the organization.
Would anyone like to make a motion to table this?
So moved.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Public comments? Hearing none. Announcements? Starting to my right, Mr. Kyra, anything? Good, okay. Mr. Bendel?
Two things, if I may, very quickly. Just want to wish all of we don't meet again until school starts. I want to wish all the students in the Wilmington Public Schools and at Shawshene Tech all the best this school year, and my best to all my fellow teachers. Hope it's a great year. So good luck to all of them, and also happy birthday to Mr. Kyra.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
I would just reiterate everything that you just said. I won't say it again just so that it comes from my mouth, but two very key points, but definitely happy birthday to you, Kevin, and best wishes to all of our school endeavors for the students, the parents, the teachers, and for the town. So hopefully our 62 project will help us through and make sure that the buses can get to North Wilmington as well. So thank you.
I just have one thing, thank you, Madam Chair. With September being Childhood Cancer Month, I would like to propose that each member of the board either wear a gold coloring or a pin to represent for our meetings in September, please.
That's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any new business? Okay, hearing none. Important dates, please.
Important dates through October 2nd is the Farmers Market Town Common Parking Lot, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. August 27th, the last day to register to vote in the state primary. Town Clerk's office will be open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. August 27th is early voting, Town Hall Auditorium, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. August 27th is the Ice Bucket Challenge, Rotary Park, 10 a.m. August 29 through September 2nd, early voting, Town Hall Auditorium, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. August 31st, school opens grades 1 through 12. August 31st is the next Senior Center Building Committee, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. September 5th, Labor Day, town offices closed. September 6th, state primary elections, polls open at 7 a.m. and will close at 8 p.m. September 7 is the first day of kindergarten. September 7 is also a brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. September 7, Town Hall School Administration Building Committee, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. September 10, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. September 10, Sons of Italy / Bairn Parents Yard Sale, Municipal Parking Lot. September 12th, a Board of Selectmen's meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m. September 14th, Senior Center Building Committee, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. September 19, Candlelight Vigil, Town Common, 6:30 to 8 p.m. September 21, Town Hall School Administration Building Committee meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. September 24th is a shredding day, Municipal Parking Lot, 9 a.m. to noon. September 25th, Wilmington's incorporation 292 years ago. September 26th, Board of Selectmen's meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m. And then September 28th, Senior Center Building Committee, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m.
Thank you for that. Jeff, just as a point of clarification, when you say municipal parking lot, what is defined as municipal parking lot?
The Swain parking lot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that takes us through important dates, and then next is salute to service, and I'll turn that over to Selectman Bendel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and on behalf of the Board of Selectmen tonight, we salute Mr. Kyle L. Gaffey. Mr. Gaffey is a tech sergeant in the United States Air Force, currently stationed in Florida, but is on leave and is currently in town for the next couple days visiting his family, so we want to welcome him home. Also worth noting that this may be a first for us, that Kyle's dad, Frank, was also recently honored by this very board with a salute to service not too long ago. So obviously a great tradition of service in the Gaffey family. So we appreciate Kyle's service, and we thank him for all he's done for our community and for our country. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing strategies with respect to collective bargaining with the New England Police Benevolent Association Local 1, which is Police Patrol, in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, because as chairman, I declare that discussion of these subjects in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's position in these matters. Upon completion of the executive session, the board will adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been made. I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote, starting to my left.
Lily Maselli, yes.
Greg Bendel, yes.
Kevin Curry, yes.
Judy O'Connell, yes. Thank you, and good night.
Good night, everybody.